Hello, everyone, and welcome to my conversation with Lee McLean. I have been looking forward to this for a while now. We've been chatting off and on about trying to have some coffee, and this is kind of what it's turned into. So thank you for doing this, Lee. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, totally. So fun. Your newest book, because you've written, how many books have you written now?
I've written actually 4 books, 2 of which is on collecting antiques, believe it or not. So
Oh,
yeah.
wow. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. That's
But the
awesome.
last two are for horse people. Yeah.
Yeah. Love and rules.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Kind of that, yeah, that's so what are you thinking as you laugh and you say that?
Oh, just that I called it Love and Boundaries before we hit the recording, and for some reason I just think it's so fun. I when I saw that title and I saw your book, and I felt like this is really good, because I feel like one of the biggest struggles in the industry right now is there's such a move towards relationship, and I feel like everyone is empowered or inspired by horses and people doing crazy things.
Mhm.
Um, but yet everybody wants the relationship, and there's this crazy move right now towards having relationship and understanding relationship. But yet there's that soul inspiration to kind of still have the ability to go out there and do cool things with our horses, and
Mm.
finding that balance in the middle, and I kind of sense and feel that inside of, the idea of love and rules is that there's this isn't this extreme kind of edge of, we're all this or we're all that, but it's yet finding the middle, yeah. So I was curious to kind of feel your thoughts on that, and just kind of get your heart behind, the naming of that.
Well, it what ended up being love and rules because that's easier for me to yell at people when I'm standing in the middle of an arena, right? Love and rules, baby. It's got it don't just pick one or the other.
Right.
Because through my riding life, and that would include my parenting,
Mm,
how I run the dogs, what kind of a friend I am, what kind of
mm,
an employer I've been, employee.
hmm
I've constantly been aware, and maybe some of the people listening, of sort of veering from one ditch to the other.
hmm Right.
I'll hit a sweet spot that's somewhere in the middle, and I'll go, oh, there, good. I've
hmm
got it.
hmm
Only poof, it's gone again. And in different situations, different personalities makes me try so hard for the one over the other.
mm,
And I'm learning. I'm 60 years old next week, and I'm just now learning that I think if you could get all of the horse people you knew in one room together and you said, what is it you want?
mm,
I think we might have come at it on different roads, but I think
hmm
we would almost all say we wanted the same thing.
mm,
I want that incredible euphoric high when that horse saved me,
mm,
when the bull turned back on me,
hmm
or when the trail gave way and we're running. I want that horse, that high of that horse who saved me because he wanted to.
mm,
But yet
exactly.
he knows all of it. He knows his job. I love riding a horse who knows his job.
Yeah. Isn't that the case? And
So
feels empowered, feels safe kind of doing it, not a horse that is doing it out of fear. And I think that's that
well,
thing. And we were chatting about that kind of before we started, and it was that sense of, there's this kind of currency. You had said, I think we'd probably like to ride the same kind of horses. and
yeah.
and I feel like that's that sense of, there's this currency that pulls you towards being connected with a horse and what that feels like, and then being able to draw out their power in super cool ways, you know, where you're able to do things that you just
Yeah,
can't do on a half bro course or a half, you know, half
yeah.
there or whatever. And it just pulls you to keep working at it.
So for me, Josh, more and more my practice of writing,
Mm,
because I want to ride and I want to write. They're
mm,
always, you know, I get
mm,
doing this stuff. More and more, I'm wanting to somehow reach out and have something of meaning to say to all the people
mm,
that are from different parts of the world, different disciplines, you know, and get us all kind of realizing that we want the same things more
mm-hmm.
often than not.
Right.
We maybe speak different language, or, you know, I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
not be as crude as I've been raised to be. I come from that culture
Yeah.
where you're not supposed to be too touchy-feely. You're supposed to be
Mm,
stoic. You're supposed to
mm,
suck it up. You know. So for me, that's been an adventure too.
yeah. Well, and coming from a crowd that having to be tough is what got you by. You know,
Yeah.
like learning to be tough is
Yeah.
what allowed you to handle the challenges, you know.
Yes.
Um, you know, and
So
I agree.
the next question then, if you are from that background, and we all have our stories, is God help me from passing that along as my way of
Hmm.
teaching.
Hmm.
So I'm at the stage in my life right now where I'm a little conflicted, but I think I'm getting better. I want so badly to honor a couple of people who really, really taught me, who
Hmm.
really saw something in me and went out on a limb, but they were harsh in their teaching.
Hmm.
They almost destroyed me. I've had 30 years of therapy to get over how they taught me, you
Hmm.
know?
Hmm.
So I want to be able to hand that on to the next generation or to people who are interested without doing the damage that was
Hmm.
done. Because
And
there's
isn't
that
that,
too.
yeah, isn't that where that relational piece comes in the work that we do,
Mhm.
that we can then take the things that we learned, but then lay it in with the relational pieces that we've maybe grown in and gotten better at, which allows you to pass forward that information, but from a softer heart because you've done the work, you know, you've done
Because,
a certain work.
well, you use the word relationship and relational. And I've been surrounded by with so many people, family, friends, mentors, who were so beautiful with how they got on with a horse.
Mm,
But their personal relationships and how they dealt with people was so, oh, it was hard.
mm-hmm,
And I'm starting to realize I don't want to be that kind of horsewoman.
mm,
And so, how many times do you talk to people who go, I love animals, but I hate people?
mm-hmm. Yeah, that used to be
Right?
an old adage you'd hear all the time, right? I'm doing
Right?
this for the horse. I'm not doing this for you.
Okay. Okay. So the ball's in your court now, because
Hmm.
you can't actually say you're going to love horses and then be untrusting and judging
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
damaged with people, because
Hmm.
that's going to get you with your horsemanship, if for no other reason than to become a better horse person.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and what I found as a teacher is that, you know, and if you follow an adage that you're going to try to be there more for the horse and not for people,
Yeah.
that horse has to go home with that person. So if
Yes.
you set a deal up for a horse and then you're hard on that person,
Yes.
that person's going to struggle with, they're going to take it out on that horse because
Yes.
it's
They're going to
you've left
struggle with
them.
they're going to struggle with the message that you sent them. You're
Yeah.
probably not going to see them again. And
Hmm.
they're going to go on.
Yeah.
And I mean, and this takes on another aspect too, for all of us who've taken horses for people, to help the horse get going for the people, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
You're trying
you
to
think you're
soften
doing
edges for the horse.
right. So then you get the
Mhm,
horse going, well, that poor horse still has to go back to that same person. So
mhm,
you can't just have a horse training
mhm. That's
operation
right. That's
if
actually
you're
what got me into teaching clinics. That is
okay.
exactly what, because I never intended to, but you train horses and you're working horses. When I started learning and went and traveled all over the place and hunted people down, and my intention was never to teach. I wanted to
Okay.
cowboy. I wanted to ride, and then slowly you start. training horses for the public, and that works really well with Cowboy because you can be using these horses and they're getting good exposure. And but then you run into problems where your horse is going really well, and then you hand them back to somebody, and within a couple of weeks they're calling you and wondering why you didn't train their horse. And it's like, oh, okay, well, come on over and let me see if I can help you with that. And and so then slowly, bit by bit, it turns into you're teaching clinics and you're trying to help folks. But I've come to believe that a true love for the horse in this industry means that you have to have an affection or an affinity to help the people as well, because that's how, without the partnership, going home happy, there's no happy horses. There's no happy horses. So, and then I also feel like, when it comes down to how we are, affects every relationship that we're involved in. And if who I am is going to come out with my horses, it's going to come out with my wife, it's going to come out with my dogs, it's going to come out in how I handle a cow. It's it's all of it. So I feel like when we really when I personally really got a hold of that who I am shows up in all these areas, and oh wow, when I'm a certain way, all these are different. And then when I change that, oh, that's changing everything. It starts to really draw you. And I think that's what this whole idea of relational horsemanship is. It's like some people look at it and would often maybe assume that it means, you're giving hugs and lots of pets and maybe not doing much. But the idea is what does it mean to actually be in an honorable relationship with each of the things? Maybe it's a spade bit. What does it mean to be in a relationship with a bit? What does it mean to be in a relationship with, asking a horse to do something challenging? So it's like you can be in relationship with a thing, and really what that means is understanding how to get it to function well. How do you help your horse function well? How do you get their physical body to function well? Or how about meeting a horse's needs so they feel safe? What does that mean? And we're not out of relationship with these things. So that was kind of the heartbeat behind my relational horsemanship kind of concept, was not necessarily just having calmness as much as I do really seek that, but it's more about what does it mean to be in relationship with how a horse thinks, how our gear works, how their bodies move.
So do you find, I'm taking over. I knew this was going to happen. This is my webinar, and I'm going to start asking you questions.
It'll go both ways.
Find though that is a huge help in steering you on social media, because social media can be a negative place and a scary place. And when you're going, no, we've got to be working with people and community and everything else, it helps, doesn't it?
Oh, it sure does. It's a funny thing, but it's kind of this concept that kind of hit me, and I really feel this in regards to social media. But people so desire, and I think it's the same feeling within us that draws us to bridle horses, like this sense of what does it feel like to get right with a horse. So what happens is I feel like a lot of people in life don't have maybe a lot of things that they can grab that feels really good, and then they find something with horses that feels really good. And so instead of expanding on that and finding it in other areas, we're going to hold on to that thing, and then we're going to defend it against everything else. So if anybody says anything that speaks negative to this thing, and it's kind of that whole like standing on a molehill, I'm going to defend this molehill. And what happens is people start to defend what's right about that thing. And I've got this concept, I call it the ProCon Insight, but it's this idea that everything has a pro and a con. But what happens a lot of times online, which is unfortunate, is this person is defending what they're right about, and this person's looking at what their con is, and this person's focusing on that person's con, but that person is only focusing on their pro or what they're right about. So they're both actually right. So I call it right fighting. It's like you're both right. You both have a point, and you're focusing on the con that no one is going to admit. But when you realize that actually everything I do has a pro and a con, there's not one moment I could not possibly be venturing into the con of the thing I'm doing. Well, and sometimes I'm in the pro, but if I could just look at it and I say, shoot, like, you're trying to show me something, and there's going to be a pro and a con, and you're going to veer into both. And I feel like online, you can see people that are, their heart is so desiring to represent this thing that they feel connected to, like the pro that they feel connected to. But but if they admit that there's a con, then they feel like they're not being heard, and it's personal. And I feel like that, honestly, that sets the tone for so much division online. And so that's that whole bit for me. So when I feel people are doing that, it's kind of like my heart goes to them a little bit, that they have this thing that they want to hang on to, and they feel like they need to hold up its value. And but when anybody does something different, that's a threat. So
Yes,
different
yeah.
isn't a
And I
learning
mean,
opportunity, it's a threat.
and if you go after me about something that I truly believe, for me, often if I'm writing something, I'm hearing the voice of my teacher.
Mm.
I may be trying to take out all the German swear words and word it differently, but I'm hearing the
Yeah.
voice of my teacher. And then when somebody says, well, that's wrong,
Mm.
I almost feel like I have to defend her honor. The
Mm-hmm,
gauntlet has
mm-hmm.
been cast, and
Yeah,
it's
right.
and I think maybe the dog world, if I hear people, is similar too, but like, man,
Mm-hmm.
the horse world, you just gotta remember why you're doing it, I guess. I think
Yeah.
it's easier for me because I'm not really trying to sell something.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
I'm I think that's easier for me because I'm not trying to sell a method or a way,
Mm-hmm.
whatnot.
Right.
But it's still, there are days when my husband comes up the walkway there and he says there's like the black mushroom cloud over our house. And he goes, oh, was somebody mean to you on Facebook? Did somebody hurt your feeling? Like he says he can see it from out in the
Mm.
yard.
Mm. Just feel it, eh?
Yeah. And there does seem
Yeah.
to be certain times of the year and phases of the moon when people are a little more hair triggered than other times. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
would agree with that.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I feel like two things for me. And it's just recognizing that, the world's tough. Life has been tough for a lot of folks. And there's
Yeah.
something about this whole horse thing. I don't know what it is with horses, but it's like some of us just have horse blood. And so when we find something with the horses that feels good and right, man, we want to hang on to that sucker. And
Yeah.
then it becomes personal really fast because it's something, it seems like it's in us. I don't know if it's just been from thousands of years of humans and horses evolving together, but there's some connection there that's just so deep. And when something that feels connected and rich feels like someone else is speaking against it, oh, you want to talk about putting your dukes up. It's like you're threatening now, and they might not even be threatening it. It's just that we're just so ready to feel like we have to defend it. And sometimes
What
it
do
is.
you what do
Sometimes it
you
is
do
open
about
attack.
that when there's conflict on your page? What do you do about that? Do you talk
Yeah.
people off the edge? Do you
Mm,
let them go? Like, what do you do about it?
yeah. Great question. I've only had a few of people that have really been, have come in with that kind of mind frame. But what I found, actually, it's really fun. Most of the time when someone has something they're coming in with, um, all it is to me is it's like, yeah, you're actually right. You have a good point. And I'll talk to their point, and then recognize that, that's kind of that ProCon Insight. I actually have gone through that with people. It's like, oh yeah, you have a good point. Really cool. I hear that. And you want to end an argument really fast?
I hear
Observe their
that.
point. Observe their point. It's like, cool. Yeah, I actually hear what you're saying. That's really cool.
See, I'm taking notes here.
It's the fun part of it is that most people that are defensive,
Yeah.
they are also expecting a confrontation.
Yeah.
And so then if you don't give them one, it takes two to tango. So I've actually had quite a bit of fun with that, where it's like, yeah, that's the point. And if people are able and they soften on some level, and oftentimes that will, because I would say that like a deeper need for people is to feel heard. Most people,
Yeah.
they
Okay.
don't
Yeah.
feel heard,
Yeah.
and if they
Yeah.
feel heard on some level, it softens the tension. And then I really do like to talk about the pro-con insight. Like, okay, so that would be your pro. Okay, and you're speaking to my con, which I am totally ready to accept. And
Okay.
here's the pro here's the reason that I like to do it, knowing that that's my con. It's like, could we observe the possible con in what you're saying, or maybe from your perspective, maybe there isn't one. It's like you just kind
Yeah.
of try to find the balance. And Mostly, I've found I've only had one person who wouldn't go there, and then we just agreed to disagree. It's totally fine. Like I
Yeah,
honestly,
okay.
it's no sweat off my back.
Yeah, yeah.
But that whole bit about being heard, has, and I feel like a lot of times, you and I mentioned sometimes those tough horses that have taught us the most.
Mhm.
I've found with a lot of those tough horses that that's actually been the biggest key too, is like there's a need that they have that they're so used to someone trying to take from them. So, a more dominance approach to horsemanship would be that we're trying to contain their body until they kind of stop arguing with you. And
Yeah.
for some of those horses, you aren't going to do it. Like you are, if you don't hear them, you're not learning. They're not going to make it work. So anyways, I feel like that's where I have found some of the best learning was from those horses that you weren't gonna put them in a headlock and have them, so it's like you got to figure something else out. Um, that's been.
I'm also finding out that the older I get, the more fragile I get, the more I have to use thinking and empathy
Oh man.
because I'm not horseman enough to deal with anything else, actually.
Mm,
You can get
yeah.
so much more accomplished.
hmm
But I do
well
see
and
I see lots of the young guys that are still at a stage where they can poke the bear, so to speak.
mm,
But I've
and what
said,
I've come to look at, that what you're saying is, I think that's somewhat the difference between, being a horseman or a horsewoman and a cowboy. And I don't mean that in any kind of critical way, but trying to recognize some people, it just doesn't matter. They're just going to pound their way through it. They're going to make that happen.
yeah,
And there is sure a skill to doing that, boy. Riding that edge of, I used to ride with a guy who, we worked at the same ranch, and then I started picking up at rodeos with him, and he'd pick up these horses, and they'd be like, I'm talking broncs, they'd be bucking guys off, and in a month we'd ranch on them for a bit. In a month he'd take them to a rodeo and he'd pick up on these horses. And I
yeah,
remember that horse's name was Scar, and he ended up letting someone else try him, and it wasn't a week and a half later the horse was bucking people off again, because he was so good at just riding those edges and staying out of trouble. And I feel like that is a horseman skill, but it's a lot of a cowboy skill of kind of knowing when to back off, and you're not really fixing stuff as much as you're just not tipping the edges. And I feel like the
it's great.
horsemanship side is really about understanding. You're trying to fix things. You want to lay down a different foundation. You want to understand it in a different way. And so I try to explain that, not in a way to demean what it means to be a cowboy, but just as a kind of a way to kind of separate the difference between what's the heart of a horseman and what is the skill of a cowboy. Because boy,
Mhm.
there's skill there, boy. There's skill.
And
And
they're
it's not
proud of it,
skill.
right? They're
Yep.
proud of it. I mean,
Yep.
I have to be real honest here. In September,
Mm,
I took a 4-year-old mare to a kid who works with my son-in-law.
mm,
He rides saddle broncs.
mm,
And this mare likes to buck. She
mm,
doesn't always. Doesn't even seem to bother her. She's just a little handier than I am.
mm,
And I have worked her on the ground, and I've done all sorts of things in saddle fit and Cairo and everything else. And
mm,
I thought, you know what? I think she maybe just needs to go be a circle horse for a couple of
mm,
months.
mm,
And I would say 3 days she was doing her usual thing. She came home, she's fine.
mm,
I mean, I've watched this kid work with horses, and he's not really into making friends with them. So I
mm,
got this in my heart, right?
mm,
But I had the feeling this horse came to me as a last ditch thing.
mm,
I'm 60 years old. I got hurt pretty bad last year
mm,
getting piled off a horse.
mm,
And I'm like, I'm sending her to him because their next option's the can, Josh.
yeah.
So I'm never done with these little bargains I make with myself and trying to
Mm,
go, is this my ego? Do I just keep
mm,
fiddling around with her or what? I don't know.
mm, mm.
Anyway, we'll see if she's fixed or not.
Well, and one of these things I find sometimes with some of these horses is that, and sometimes it's the same way with people. Sometimes just getting those horses out and giving them a job can be the best thing for them, because it can sometimes get them out of kind of
Kind
always
of a
having to
bad
sort
little
out their
cycle
feelings.
anyway.
Yeah.
So these guys, it's one of those situations where you got 25 miles to ride to the herd,
Hmm.
and then 10 o'clock at night you're riding home again. So yeah, she was mostly tired,
Hmm.
but
Right. Well, I can do that too.
I did try to give her an opportunity, and it's for anybody listening, when you are training horses that are going to end up for other people,
Mm,
there becomes other things, factors into play that allow you to keep a good name,
mm,
keep in business. So if I start having this horse, and I've had this horse for over a year before I've gotten to this point where I think she needs a young cowboy for a while, right?
mm, mm,
And I had to make sure that it wasn't somebody that was going to get bucked off that first day she bogged her
mm,
head, and
hmm,
not actually go after her. He just
hmm.
rides her out
Right.
till she long trots away. He doesn't actually
Yeah.
care.
Hmm.
And so it was but there's always these aspects. Okay,
Hmm.
she's on my books now for another year.
Mm,
I'm gonna have, I'm gonna be wanting when she is ready to go. It's like all these
hmm.
other factors, which weren't ever what I ever actually thought I was going to be doing
Hmm. Yeah.
until my real life situation. But when I had to bring that up, because I thought I can't sit here and go, I'm all about relationship and giving
Hmm.
them chances, because I was running out of tools with her.
But I'd like to add to that too, because I feel like, so sometimes we want to say, we want it to all sound real pretty. But sometimes when you have to talk something out with somebody and it's a conversation you're not really looking forward to, that sometimes it can be hard. You have to share things and you got to talk about stuff that's not easy, and it can be upsetting and it can be emotional, and but yet if you're not able to have those conversations and actually get into that, it doesn't always heal things. You can't just glaze things over. So what I feel in that situation, and you said a couple things I think that are pretty important, Lee, and you said he wasn't upset with her,
Yeah,
and
he
he was
doesn't
just
take nothing
he's
personally.
not taking it personal, but he was able to stay with her. And
Yeah.
and what I feel like now a lot of times there's not, I wouldn't say there's, I think there's a lot of different ways to help horses in these spots, but there are times when they they need to be able to have their say, and they need someone to hold space for them, so to speak. Like they have this idea in their head. I call them stove touchers, and there's people like that too. You can say to them, this is a good idea, and they say, I got to do this myself. And there's other
Hmm.
people, man, you tell them and they're just changed forever. So
I
then,
had a kid like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So right. Usually you have
Yeah.
one of each, or you have
Yeah.
there's
I
some that are
know.
like that, and not. But okay, so then he goes there and he lets her have that opinion, and she tries it, and she learns that she doesn't have to kind of do that. But I think the thing that happens in a lot of those situations is you got to be able to sit there with a horse like that, and so then having someone who can have a relationship with that, and I feel like that's it. It's like, okay, well, is it really bad that someone has to be there for, but the only time it's bad is if it says that if she does that, that means she's totally bothered, she's dysregulated, all these things. And sometimes that's not the case. They think that's the answer. They think that's their only way through it. And so if you can sometimes let them have that voice, but someone holds space for them and then shows them they can move their feet, they don't have to go here, they can go there. It's like, oh, you don't have to go here, you can go here.
Well, and
That's not a
two,
bad thing.
if you've got an in situation, and I know it's helped me out a lot, that there's this thing about the outside focus, the outward focus.
Mm, mm,
And sometimes I'll get with a horse. I love that horse. I want so much for that horse because I see so much in that horse.
mm,
You almost get like a married couple,
right.
you know, and I you get there out there with the cow, for instance, though,
Mm,
and suddenly my eye is on the cow. The horse's eye and ear is on the cow.
hmm
And now we have an outward focus that gets us out of our heads.
hmm
And then almost starts to build teamwork. And so
Totally.
sometimes I think that if we're struggling with relationship with certain horses or people, sometimes we have to find that thing that we can do together,
Mm,
that job that
absolutely.
we can do, that thing where we can first take that picking at each other and
hmm
replace it with a sense of accomplishment
Uh,
or cows are so beautiful for that,
aren't they?
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
they are.
I think that's the point where you hear a lot of uh, ranchers or horsemen or, more in that world that say you really can't build a horse without them. And I know exactly what they're leaning on there because, man, if you can teach a horse something and then show them how to put it to work and then teach them something else and show them how to put it to work, you start drawing another part out of the horse because the horse sees a purpose to the thing you're doing almost every time you teach them something. It's like
Yeah,
they
yeah.
have this place, and I can really hear where that comes from. And I find these horses like this, they don't get, and I've seen this many times. A lot of times when you have these kind of horses, they need somebody who can just go give them a job because they have to stop talking about their feelings for a while. And I feel like that's the same sometimes. It's
Well,
like talking about your feelings is good.
and I think almost for this mayor, when he just said, "Oh, okay, I'm not going to be, yeah, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to pull your head. I'm not going to
Mm-hmm.
hold you in a wondering stop.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, you go ahead, and then when you're done, when you've had your say,
Yeah.
let's go over that hill and gather the
Yeah.
cows."
Yeah.
And
That's
she's like,
great.
"Oh, okay." And
Totally.
it got more and more half-hearted,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to turn her out, like I think
Mm-hmm.
November I had to quit on her. So but she was doing good when I put her out, and I always I always say if they're doing good when you turn them out, they usually come into the spring,
Mm-hmm.
come back in the spring, kind of gung-ho and ready to
Mm-hmm.
go.
Yeah.
I've turned a
Yeah.
couple out due to bad weather or for various reasons that were maybe struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And they come back in the spring, Josh. They're needing real extra
Needing
care.
help.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to say something else to that too, just in regards to, you kind of sharing that, you had this person that needed
That was a
or the whole
vulnerable thing, okay? I
really
couldn't
good.
sit here and go onward knowing that I had this
Mhm.
dirty little secret.
Well, and I think that's a thing for people, it's like, oh man, can I keep moving with this horse or do I need to get some help? And
Yeah,
I
and
feel like,
I'm not good at asking for help. I
yeah,
equate that with personal failure.
sure. Totally.
So
Well, especially the trainer in us. I recognize that. It's like, oh, I should be able to figure this out. I should be able to figure this out. But there's a time when honestly, it's just having someone else's eyes or someone else's insight, or it brings all the clarity. I just totally agree with you. And we had chatted about this before we started, but just the importance of vulnerable leadership, of people that are in kind of leadership roles in the horse industry, of how important it is to share just absolutely, our learnings our knowledge can sometimes come from this place of seeming like we got it all figured out. And I just, from the simple things
well,
to the more
I'm
complex things, right?
I'm learning that whenever because I've got like good Lee here and I've got horrible Lee here. Every now and then, horrible Lee whispers in my ear and says, "I would never put up with that," or "I would
Mm,
never have a horse that did that." Well,
hmm
sure as shooting, the minute that little voice speaks up, I get that horse in my
hmm
life, right?
Right. Yeah. Isn't
And
that
then
the case? Hmm
and then I I've always I've always taken a fair bit of pride in horses that move well.
Yeah.
They walk
Mhm.
beautifully. They trot freely. Their back is up. I was taught to be always really, really watching how my horses were developing in their bodies.
Mm.
Your riding tells a story to your about, or your horse's body tells a story
Mm.
about your riding and your horsemanship, right?
Mhm.
Long before biomechanically correct became a phrase that we
Mhm.
paid
Right.
attention. And so I go believing that it has something to do with me.
Mm. Mm.
And then I get this mare in my life. She's the paciest walker, and she doesn't move well. She doesn't want to move well. She's like, and I'm dealing with her. So now I'm going, she's been vetted. We've done ulcers. We do all the things because I'm learning slowly
Mm.
that when I can't figure a horse out, maybe we should actually back up and go figure out what's wrong, right? Instead of
Mm.
just, yeah. Anyway, that's taken me a long time to work at. But the minute that I'm going, oh, I would never have a horse that would not walk that well.
Mm.
That's the next horse that comes into my life,
Mm.
so it's fascinating that way. And
Mm.
it
Isn't
is
it true?
it's the tougher ones that stump us,
Mhm.
that give us the lessons that we learn from, which brings up another interesting thing for me is now horse keeping is lifestyles of the rich and famous
Mm.
for in many places. And it does not allow people to ride a large number of horses
Mhm. Mhm.
to get those experiences.
Yeah.
And I look back over my life and I realize it was a large number of horses with
Mhm.
varying gifts
Mhm.
and hard stories
Mhm.
that made me who I am now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I do
how
agree
do
with
I
that. Yeah.
talk and teach to
Mhm.
somebody who has one horse?
Mhm.
Because that one horse is carrying all of their hopes and dreams and everything else, and they've got to learn. And I don't demean that in any way. And
Mhm.
I hope that those people who have the one horse don't feel that I don't care about horses because I've had many. I do
Mhm.
have in my life always one horse that I worship.
Mhm.
I think the world of. But
Mhm.
I am aware that our horsemanship's changing a little bit because the opportunity, even for children, is not there, with insurance and whatnot. Most barns don't want to have people drop their kids off at 8 in the morning and pick them up at bedtime.
Right.
So
Right.
where do you and I speak to these people and teach
Mhm. Yeah.
this
Yeah.
situation? Because they have a different experience with horses than maybe you or I or the average
Mhm.
person in the business did.
Yeah. Absolutely. I just feel you there. I feel like I've always thought, well, it's a thought that's developed in my mind that, under the taking the word horse, and every horse I've worked was just a small part of one of those letters. And as you work more and more horses, you start spelling an H, and then you ride 100 more, and then you just go an O,
Mm,
and then it's like it takes so many horses to understand horse is really what I'm getting at. But what I've come to with people regarding that is like I just feel like people need the liberation, the freedom. There's often so much emotional attachment because people have a horse and they've desired to have horses for their whole life. And a lot of times
yeah,
these horses have been picked out of a lineup. And I always say
yeah.
to people, it's like, well, what would have been like if you would have picked your husband out of a lineup and then just figured like made it in your head that you had to make that work now, that you just hope it's going to work, and now you're supposed to emotionally attach
How
yourself
did
to
you
it.
know? How did you know that's what I did?
Well, then you're a lucky one.
Women love a project, right? They see a troubled
Yeah.
man and they go, "I'll
Yeah,
take you."
I'll
Yeah.
take him. And I just feel like I've always tried to give people the recognition that that there's a real possibility, and you don't have to decide this right now, that possibly that you guys are maybe not matching up well. And I always want to ask people, are you here to dive into a project, or are you looking for a cup filler? And so I think and then there's somewhere in the middle. Some horses are a bit of both. But by recognizing is like, what do you want in this? And if you do want maybe a cup filler, then you're gonna, this is the kind of horse you might need to look for. And then if you want a project, maybe this one's going to work really well. But to differentiate that a project is not going to be able to fill you emotionally as you desire, because they don't have it within them. They need help to feel like their needs can be met before they feel whole. And I think it's just by like opening up the space, because they don't have the depth of thousands of horses behind them to recognize that, I've seen 600 projects like that, and I've seen, 1,000 ones that were, good, solid horses. They don't have that. So it's almost like, I feel like giving them the liberation to say, do your best, but on the same hand, you really need to get soulful about like, what do you want to do here? And I feel like it's been hard for people because they feel emotionally attached. It's like, I have to make this work. I have to make this horse work because I want him to do well. And what I love for people is the middle, a little bit of both.
the middle ground. It always comes to the middle ground. And we're hard on ourselves because not everybody, and this is people too, can accept the help we offer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So whether it's a person with drugs and alcohol in the family, or a horse that's just been through so much stuff that, I mean, and different horse personalities are able to forgive easier than others.
Mm-hmm.
They're not all the same.
Mm-hmm.
Some take trauma almost like a badge of honor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm damaged.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Here I am, and so, and we see such beautiful, amazing possibilities online. And I think that's one thing that is a challenge from when I was a young horsewoman. I had a shelf of books, and I had people who could tell me I was doing the wrong thing, or maybe to keep trying something. But there's such a wealth of information out there now. I could watch you do a video on a Tuesday and go, that Josh Nickel, he's got all the answers. I'm buying the CDs, the set, everything else. And then Wednesday, some fellow maybe from the UK, I'll see him, and Germany, and then I want to maybe do cow horse or dressage. Or it's really hard to face up to all of the information that's out there now and tell yourself, I am going to discipline myself to try to stay the course with one thing to see if that can help me long enough before I add in other things. And do you not see that? It's and I fight it myself. It's like this huge buffet of rich foods, and
everything looks like it tastes so good at the beginning. And I feel like that's the thing. It's like, oh, there's the answer. Well, and I see this so much, and I do have my thought on it, but it's like every bit of information that you when you first see something, you're going to be inspired by it. I don't care who it is. Okay. It's going to seem somewhat inspiring to you. It's going to touch some part of you. Then that information is going to have to get to the part of you that's not allowing it to be a reality in your life. So now you're going to have to make a change. So now it's like you feel the information, and so whether that teaching's coming into you, it's going to bump up against what's blocking you from already doing it. So first of all, you need to learn it, but then you need to try to actually perform it. Well, you're going to be horrible at it in the beginning because you don't have a tangibility for it. And I see that's where most people give up, because they say, well, this isn't working. It should be working, but I haven't even gained the aptitude to do it. So then that's when people want to jump the boat and get the next appealing thing over the fence. So this is always my encouragement on this, is if something speaks to your soul, the first recognition, and I say this to people when they come into my work, the first thing you have to recognize is that this is super tasty to you right now. But as soon as it bumps up against, number one, your lack of competency at this stage, because you're just learning my stuff, you're not going to be competent at it right away. And also, it's going to touch something inside you that has to grow. Both of those things are not going to taste good. But on the other side of that, you will start to develop a competency, but you're going to have to move through it. So I say that whether it's my stuff or anyone else's, okay? Because first of all, you have to find a community you feel safe in. And if you feel safe in my community, then get ready to feel pushed and to feel tested and have to grow and have to let go of things and suck for a while. Or if it's somebody else. And actually this happened to me at a conference that I was speaking at. And a lady came up to me and she's like, "Oh, I just love your work." And because she heard me talk, and then she was telling me that she had been working with someone else that was speaking at the conference, and she was thinking maybe she should move away. And I asked where she was at in the process. And I said, "Don't you dare follow me. Don't you dare. I want you to stay with him. I want you to keep working. The theory and the work you're working on is awesome. You're just not competent yet. Give yourself more time." Because you can't quit when it gets tough unless something in your soul contradicts the way you're seeing the work done. That's different.
Okay? That is different. And that is different.
Different.
And I have been riding with, my mentor isn't into relationships with horses or people, but I have been riding with him for 14 years because I am picking his bones with everything he knows technically. I can look after the other stuff. So I make no bones about that. I will drive home because it's a 2-hour round trip. I will drive home and some days I feel crummy. Was it because I struggled and I worked through uncomfortable stuff? Right? Was it because I felt less than? Am I the only person that goes to a lesson with this tiny, tiny flickering hope that my mentor will say to me, "You know it all. I have nothing left to teach you.
You're doing great. Yeah, you're amazing."
And so I come home and I'm deflated because I suck. But I know that with some work and stick with itness, I won't suck. Maybe I'll suck next week too, or next month, but I'll see her through because I've been with him for 14 years now. But when I come home from someplace or somebody and my heart is sick inside, my gut,
that's
because
different.
I was asked to do something that goes against what I feel, what I know, what my horse was ready for. We all know when we've treated someone badly. And so if I am in that situation, it's up to me to be my horse's advocate and go, "I'm not going to be in that position again," right? That's a different thing, right?
Totally. But how important to take some time to sort that out. Because we say, "Oh no, stick to it." Well, no. And I say that's soul leadership, like leadership in your own soul is what is here for you. What are you here for? Like, what path are you on? And everybody's on different paths, and that's what makes the world tasty. It's like everybody's doing different things, and it doesn't have to all be the same. But if someone is doing something that does not speak to your soul, and I've tried to mentor people to this so much because it can be hard when you have to say, I don't want to do that anymore. I'm not doing that. And sometimes you need to do that, because if you don't do that, your soul voice stops speaking to you. Like if you tell your soul voice, no, enough, the voice gets smaller and smaller. But if you can speak to it and you can keep intensifying and listening to that voice and guiding it in balance, there's that word again, in balance, man, that's totally different story. But on the other side of that is when things get hard, but you're inspired by what you keep seeing. Okay. This is never the moment to stop the journey that you're on. Okay. And I feel that with our horses too. You take a horse, and I see this a lot, you take horses that have maybe not got a lot of experience. They haven't gone out a lot. maybe more in the arena, and you take them out of the yard and they lose their minds because they've just never
Yes.
had experience with this. Well, that doesn't mean that horse can never leave the yard, but it means that's not something they have experience with. So they may show a dysregulation, but yet there's that. So then it's like, we need to find a way to build those skills. And that's going to empower the horse versus I take the horse to the end of the driveway and then give him a licking because he's not doing what I ask. You see there again, now that's different. So how do we empower these things? How do we grow through what's hard without recognizing that hard is bad, but it still has to kind of come from a soul space? And I think that's where the empowerment comes, because you're still honoring that kind of soul thread where it's like, no, that really does speak to what I want. And how do I embrace the hard for myself now? You know,
that sounds right to me. I came from a very good program where people fought very hard to be accepted to ride with this person. I was young. And it was a piece at any price sort of a mindset. I learned a lot, but I took that forward into my own relationships with people too. Just bite your tongue. Don't show that you're hurting. Don't show that you've got a different idea or anything else. It's part of, and the culture, the horsemanship culture has been very big on that. And I think it's like, it's sort of a military kind of a thing, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Don't show weakness.
We're trying to change a little bit. So much of those methods had very good technical points.
Hugely.
So
and there's
this
that,
is where I am right
ProCon.
now.
Yeah,
trying to
but
keep
Lee,
that
that's
technical.
that's that ProCon Insight. Where's the pro? The pro is there's a lot of people that don't know the technical elements of achieving a certain thing, and those techniques are amazing. But then there's this other side, that's relationship. So we might not necessarily in this moment be fully relational, but you're really learning the technical pieces. And then I think everybody just has to recognize where they're willing to stretch. And for some people, I can stretch a little more if I know I'm achieving something. And then for others, if they feel the horse is being sacrificed even a little bit, they can't stretch on that. And that's okay. Like you have to be able to find your own soul line. And in any one moment, you know, like, man, if you could, and I also find that this is a thing for me. I didn't become, I would say that this journey of empowerment, of kind of like gaining strength in life, it doesn't come by not facing trial. Like, it kind of comes by facing stuff. And I feel like that with the horses. A lot of horses don't actually face enough. They don't have enough challenges in their life. They don't.
Glad
and
you
so
brought that. I have a little thing of notes here. And I wrote them in such a hurry that I can't read them anyway. But in one of those notes was, there is beauty in hardship. And anyone who has gone through serious illness, for instance, right? I was a competitive son of a buck before I got sick. And there was a couple of years there lying on a bed. And it kind of just seeped out into the mattress somewhere. I was chained. But I learned that there is beauty in having hardship and facing up to stuff like that. And in many ways, right now, I feel so many of the self-help books I see, the little memes that come across my, you know, I'm like everybody else sitting there getting new tires on the truck. I'm on my phone, and you know, it's all this
sure,
being happy, and what I focus on is what I'll get and all this stuff. And I kind of get that, but in the way it's not really saluting the hardship that if you come out the other end, and that would be horses that have had a job, you know, I can remember riding a horse that would just blow up if you were on him and it was supper time.
Mm,
You know what I mean?
mm,
He had a time clock that he punched. At 5 o'clock, you better have your
mm,
job done or he's going to pile you.
mm.
Well, that's not how life works.
Mhm,
Sometimes our meal will be at 8 o'clock or 9, and
mhm,
that's you or
mm,
me too.
mhm,
So we in our trying to live a happy life for ourselves and make things beautiful for our children, we can here we are steering again, right?
mhm, mhm. Yeah.
If
Well,
it's too perfect,
mm,
if it's too perfect, it's like soup that needs salt.
mhm. Well, it doesn't become wisdom. And to me, it's like the knowledge that we have with experiences. If it lacks experience, then the knowledge becomes criticism. And that's another thing I've noticed with the online platforms is that there's a lot of times there's lots of knowledge, but it's the experiences that allows that knowledge to become wisdom because you see all the variations of it. You see the different facets and the highs and the lows and the thickness of it. And but without the experience, that knowledge doesn't have its time to nurture itself into you. And I just feel like, yeah, as horsemanship becomes wisdom when it has experience. And I know, I have a couple horses in my pen, and I truly think they're warriors. Like they're the ones, if I had the hardest job or the easiest job, I would pick them as often as I could because their level of experience, the level of things they've been through have caused them to be so deep, like so deep. And I feel like experience, there's always a choice in experience. But I feel like with horses, the level that you consider them relationally dictates how the challenge sinks into their bones. So it's no different than you and I. If you're with a person who really considers you, then when you go through hard things, it really has the potential to deepen you. But if there's a piece there missing relationally, the hard things make it crumble. And
Yeah,
so when you, and I think that's the balance of
yeah.
relationship to empowerment. So I feel like that's why when we try to push our edges, it will tell us if the relationship is deep enough to handle the thing we're pushing. But I feel like we probably have to push more often than we are to keep getting that information, but keep going back and forth so that you can really deepen your horse's ability to move through life in a relational way to become empowered. It's like that's what we all desire. Is that horse that
I think
will be
so.
there for us.
I think
They'll
so.
be there for
My
us.
my wish is that everybody gets a chance to have that with their horse.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had a horse that you loved that is such a brave warrior?
Mm-hmm.
And you are aware that it's a one-sided relationship almost
Mm-hmm.
because I had a horse that way not long ago, Cody. He only kind of put up with me because he technically needed me to open the gates so that he could do what he needed to
Mm,
do. But
mm,
what a beautiful relationship that is.
mm,
I
mm.
mean,
So good.
yeah, the warrior. Yeah. Now I see
Uh,
little colored bubbles of printing on the screen, and I'm trying to go like this in my glasses. Is that people asking questions? Has anybody asked a good question?
oh, that's a good question.
Somebody try to get us arguing,
Really?
debating.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's a challenge.
No, I see. I see. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Bring up some questions. I'm just going to look through here. There's been quite a bit of stuff. Appreciate this conversation and the insight on something. It might look ugly, but it can be ugly without being.
Mm.
Yes. Back from there's just been some good conversation. I thought I was getting a cup filler and ended up with a project, and it turned out to fill a cup I didn't know was
Yeah,
empty. That's pretty
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. There is that horse too, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
you end up getting the tools and the
Mm-hmm.
insight and the empathy, the whole package. is developed and you want to fast track because you've got that difficult horse that demanded growth of you.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you do finally knit with that horse, and not all horses can, but when that horse and you do knit, I would say you're unstoppable.
Mm-hmm.
You are.
Well, I believe that's what develops that intimate connection between a person and a horse, because it's like you've been through something together. I feel like that really is what deepens relationship. You know, when you have that,
It's like the band of brothers thing, right? People have
usually.
been in service together, something.
Mm-hmm.
People from the outside don't understand it. So, you know, when we do end up with the project horse, this is what
Yeah.
gets hard. Somebody says to us, that horse isn't suited for you, or that horse can't get you where you want to go. In your heart, you're like, but what if? What
Mm-hmm.
if you're
Right.
wrong? What if I
Mm-hmm.
give up too soon?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All these what ifs.
Well, and I've said that, you know, that's the thing, you know, when people come to me and and I always ask that question. So there's a good chance this is a project, or this might take you some time to get where you desire to go. And here's maybe what it'll take. Does your soul desire that? And a lot of times people say, yes, I want to do what it takes. And it's like, okay, well, there's a chance you might actually be doing groundwork for 2 years. Like you might not be able to do all the things. Are you okay with that? You might need to get some help. You might have to have someone else ride this horse a little bit. Are you, you know, and I find that that's where, you know, when people say, and I can see it in their eyes, they say, I want to do, it is in me. I want to do whatever it takes, you know. Okay. And I feel like that's a teacher liberation too, because there's a sense of saying, okay, I'm going to give you guidance, but it's going to take some time here. Are you up for that?
Yeah.
And if you're not, then it might not be a good match, you know. And I feel like that's where that muddy middle ground comes, and we might have to reanalyze this in 6 months. You might be blowing me out of the water and you might have it all sorted out and it'll be amazing, but
I mean,
there's somewhere in the
you
middle.
could be like I was when I was a kid. I was offered a chance to have a very nice medium level dressage horse. My mother worked 2 jobs to buy that horse. And if I'd been a nice kid, I would have said, no, Mom, I'll go to the lessons and learn to make a horse myself. I said, no, I want that horse. And so this horse with all this so-called good riding on him comes to me. And turned out he was as messed up as the next guy. And my teacher had me walking on him. I didn't canter that horse for probably an entire year. Right? So we think we're maybe buying the quick fix, the horse that will take us to showroom glory.
Right.
And if we've got a good teacher that isn't bamboozled by price tags and big names.
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just how you match, right? You know, I've had some people that they do have a really polished horse, you know, you can get on them and do some fancy things, but just the way they match, you know, it's like, well, this might take you some time, you know. And again, I feel like it's that question of, you know, what are you in it with this horse for? You know, what's your plan? I think it's kind of creates some liberation. A couple questions coming up.
Yeah.
Claudia says, could you live a life without horses? And if you can't, what is it that the horse is for you? Wow, that's a deep one. And if not, what is it that the horse is for you? Huh. So let's start the first part. Could you live a life without horses, Lee?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have lived a life without horses many times. Horses have come and gone from my life several times. They're almost like water coming and going out of it. And not because I turned my back on them, but finances, illness, being a busy mom. I had 3 children that weren't in school. Like they came boom, 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 and we were busy. And so there was this part of me that was missing something, I think. But yeah, I've been without horses several times in my life. What gets me through? When I'm asleep, I'm always loping.
That's cool. It's a cool thing to do while you
I'll be
sleep.
like this. asleep in bed, and it's not an
Mm,
easy thing for somebody who is sharing the bed with me. So I know that in my heart, I was one of those people that was born with something ancient in
mm,
my DNA.
mhm, mhm,
So
mm,
the times that I'm nowhere near them, I'll garden like a fiend, or
mm,
I did livestock photography for many years where I went and
mm,
photographed other people's horses.
mm. Cool.
Um, I've taught a lot. I've taught many years. I began teaching 4-H when I was 16.
Mm,
So I filled my cup with lots of different activities, and I've turned my back on them entirely. But for me, and I'm seeing this writing on the wall more and more, I will be not riding as many
mm,
horses that have a turnover and go else places.
mm,
Um, I'll be riding more horses to a more advanced level for my own
mhm,
self.
mhm,
Um, because I am learning that this last year where I was in recovery,
mm,
I didn't bounce back really fast. I'm still in physio. Um, I you're faced with something that makes you realize, what am I waiting for?
mm. Right.
I'm really fortunate because I have this thing in me that wants to write.
Mm,
I want to tell stories. I want to fire up people. Josh, one of the most beautiful, heartbreaking, heartrending things that I've ever been witness to is I worked at a National Historic Site for a few years, cooking on a cook stove, feeding staff and people.
mm,
And I looked out my window one day because there was guys riding horses and moving cows and doing things, and there was always people around. And there was a tour bus came in, and they were people from a huge city in China. And they all were taking pictures and everything. And a young man, he'd have been 40 maybe. He walked up to a horse and he was having like a holy moment. He had never touched an animal, been anywhere
mm,
near a horse or anything. And he went to his knees weeping when he was
mm,
standing in front of a horse.
mm,
And and just racked with sobs, and the horse of course put his head down, and they touched foreheads and stood there for the longest time.
mm,
And I just had these waves of chills down my spine.
mm,
We take so much for granted. Do you know
mm,
that?
mm. Absolutely.
Something in him from centuries ago
Mm,
was a
mm,
horseman,
mm,
was a horseman. And he was living in some little high rise somewhere, and that was faced with this. And
mm,
I was like, okay, that was a turning point for me. I gave in my notice after I'd seen that.
mm,
And I decided I was no longer going to be putting in odd hours after my job training horses.
mm.
That's
Right.
what I was going to do. But it was
Mm,
watching him changed my life. And I
mm,
went, we take so much.
mm.
We take so much.
And well, thank you. And I have to say, I know I'm not the only one here that is very glad to hear that you are going to continue to write, because like, I am so captivated by your writing and your stories about how all of a sudden, and I'll tell you something, Facebook and social media has got us all to a place where if it doesn't grab us, people are not reading more than two sentences and they're off to something else.
That's what I'm told. Yeah.
Yeah. And I find often, after, I'm four paragraphs in and I'm still just drawn by your writing. So I'm thankful to hear that's going to
I
continue.
know. I keep getting these very demanding notices from Facebook going, catchy pictures, reels, a
Yeah.
good sentence. And
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
like,
Right.
oh,
Don't do too
oh,
much. Yeah. And I feel like, when you say that about that heartfelt pull, and I honestly feel like that's the heart, the soul voice of the relationship. There's something about these animals that has so much richness. And I feel like the beauty of it is the balance between being able to cultivate that space and continue to encourage it in people, And that inside of it also lies the adventurous connection that horses and people have been through for thousands of years. That together we've done so much together, and that can have that beautiful blend of richly honoring something so sacred and also doing amazing things in life together, and I feel like,
Think
there's ups and downs and
how much is really new, right? I often think
yeah.
about that because I just finished reading Xenophon's
Hmm.
book on
Hmm.
horsemanship.
Yeah.
And so what is that? 2,400 years ago that was written.
It's a few days
And
back.
and I'm going, how much do we keep thinking we're coming up with something new and better. And
Hmm.
I'm just
Hmm.
wondering how many centuries of people have felt the same. I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah,
Any
I
more
understand.
questions?
Let's just have a look. There's a few more here. We'll do one more and I think we'll wrap it up. Michelle says, towards the project horse or having to really grow with a particular horse. I think I've heard both of you say something like believe in your horse. In my opinion, that also means believe, like Lee just said, maybe you'll become a super couple, but also to me, it means believe what your horse tells you and meet them there, which usually means to leave your agenda behind and meet your horse where they are. My horse, True, tells me what he thinks, and sometimes I wish he didn't. Yeah, cool.
You
Well,
know,
I honestly
w-
think that there's lots of times horses, I think this is a hard part for us, is there's a lot of parts to the relationship with horses where the horses will reflect back to you qualities within you that need to grow and change, and I
mhm,
think that balances with us asking horses to do things because we're still
mhm.
asking them to do things, but on the same hand the horse is constantly reflecting back to us certain character traits or certain things we could grow in, and I feel like I like to try to take that in a good balanced measure, because it is true our horses can show us so much about ourselves if we listen.
I was raised in an environment where you did not quit. You did not quit. You did not give up on people. You don't leave a man
Mm,
behind, so to speak.
hmm.
And that seems like such a good, here's your pro con.
Hmm.
Wow.
Right.
That
Yeah.
seems like such a good thing until I learned that every so often my hopes and dreams, so well meant,
Hmm. Right.
it brings me to tears to think of them.
Hmm.
They were too much for a particular horse.
Hmm.
Maybe the horse that vetted soundly,
Hmm.
that that was so beautiful, had done so little work, there was no wear and tear on him. There surely was nothing wrong. If I just hung in there, if I just kept going through those ugly
Hmm.
days, day after
Hmm.
day, I have learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do
Hmm.
is say, I hear you.
Hmm.
That's a tough
Right.
one.
Hmm.
And knowing
Yeah.
what that stage is, because
Mm.
that's loving horses too. And we've all been told not to give up.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
If I love you hard enough and want it hard enough, and it comes from a heart place, it can't be bad,
Hmm.
can it?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So I've learned that lesson too.
Hmm. 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 Man, such good stuff. Couple more. I'm gonna try to do my best to um another one here. Have read and studied everything I can, many years of riding lessons, and have started 8 horses, which I know is nothing. Well, that's not true.
Oh,
Love the
it,
training.
it sure is something to those 8 horses.
That's right. But really lack experience in getting out and about with my horses. I'm 61 and running out of time. I have had some accidents, more fearful now. I need to get an experienced horse that can pack me around safely. Cool. What do you want to say there, Lee?
I want to say something. I have never been a fearful rider. When I look back at some of the things I've done with horses, surely I was drugged out of my mind and sensibility or something. But I am talking to friends who are lifelong horse people, particularly women mostly, but maybe even some men, that waning courage is a thing that's
Mm,
meant to keep us safe.
mm,
And it is in there. And we should listen to it. I find that if I am away from the saddle, if I'm not getting out riding a lot, if I hang up my spurs for a month or two, which happens with us with winter, let's face it, then I am more cautious and worried when I get back to it. But the fear thing, Josh, the fear thing. Um, there's a lot of us riding scared.
mm-hmm,
So are we in a peace at any price relationship
mm,
where we haven't had the courage or the guidance to ask our horse the tough questions where he needs to step up and build his character?
mm-hmm,
Um, I I think sometimes that when we are worried, it's because our gut knows that we're maybe not safe.
mm-hmm,
But
mm,
I'm seeing, and I think it's because we are in an aging population. I salute you because you are a man in this industry.
mm,
And I have a real worry because I'm seeing a lot of the new horse people coming into the business are women.
mm,
And once again, when we become heavy in one way, we
mm,
lose the balance. And
mm-hmm,
there's such
mm-hmm,
good yin and yang with male and
mm-hmm,
female energy, voices, and
mm-hmm,
everything else, which
mm-hmm,
is why this is a good conversation.
mm-hmm,
So I mean, the fear thing, I think whether it's because we've been hurt, illness causes fear, aging causes fear, inappropriate riding situations with people who don't honor your safety causes fear,
mm-hmm,
um, inappropriate horses. And
mm-hmm,
how do we approach fear? To
mm-hmm.
me, it's there. It's like the thing that nobody wants to talk about.
Yeah, it's such a big piece. I think, two things come to mind really quick. I think that that's such a big piece to working with people in the community. And I think you're right. I think, first of all, it's an amazing trigger that tells you there's something you're bumping up against that your body doesn't feel prepared for.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily like it's a negative thing. We say, oh, you got to get over your fear. Well, I actually don't really think you do have to get over that fear. I think you should be really
Mhm.
thankful for that part, that there's this
Yes.
innate sense that says you might not be prepared for what you're facing, where in our more youthful bodies, we just do it anyways. So we just plow through it because our bodies can handle it. And then slowly, as we get a little bit older, we don't bounce as well. Then we think, oh man, I'm not scared. Well, you're not really scared. You heard it the whole time, but initially you just didn't even listen to it. You just plowed through it. And I think actually, if you look at it, the second part of fear, if you look at it different, it's actually the path. So your body says you're nervous of this or you're scared of that. So it was like three doors. And the first one is don't do it. Like just get away, don't do it. Like, and we make our
Mhm.
world smaller. And the third one is get over it. Just get over it. And good luck. Good luck, any of you. You might have a good day and it's like, okay, I got it. I cantered my
Mhm.
horse today. Oh,
Mhm.
okay. Oh, and then the next day, what comes up again? It's like, oh, okay, press yourself up. You're trying to get over it. And what I think the third one is it's actually the third one is that the answer lies inside of the thing. So if you're fearful, it merely means the chasm between what you feel competent and what you desire is greater than your capabilities. So so then if you say, okay, well, my desire is to canter, well, how about just find somebody who can canter your horse that might have the ability? How about start by saying what do you feel comfortable with? I actually do a whole series on fear, but the break down the distance between, but you first have to honor what is it that makes you nervous, and then see that, okay, and then now start building steps rather than feel like you have to make that big leap, but find how many roads can you make to begin towards that endpoint and make it a process instead of a jump.
Yeah.
So I feel like, and get help, man, get help. You
Oh,
know, it's
here we
like,
go
so
again, asking for help.
yeah,
Yeah,
totally. Get help.
yeah,
So your horses aren't experienced enough. Well, find somebody that might be able to give you that help. Find somebody that has the confidence that can take your horse and maybe go work on a ranch, or, you know, something. There's, I think one of the biggest limitations I found is that, and I did this for years in certain areas, because funnily, you started in the ranching community. I clawed and fought to be accepted by it, and didn't really, you know, I was kind of always on the outside of things. And it's just funny how we want a thing, but when I gained the bravery to just start asking questions, oh, it just opened up. But when I felt like I needed to kind of create my own deal, and it's like, it just, nothing works, because I didn't reach out for help. So anyways, I feel like that's the other part, is like, how many ways can you reach out until you feel a soul line? And I feel like that's the other thing to fear, is you have to find a soul line to your answer. When you sit in the feelings of fear, I think it just crushes us, because now that's not an answer, that's just an emotion. But if
yeah.
you can start focusing on a soul line to something that you desire, it starts to change the complexity of the deal, so it breaks it into parts more. Yeah, but fear, holy smokes, talk about a big piece to the community that we live
Yeah,
within.
it
Hey.
is. It is. It is. And I'm glad in many ways the pro of aging, for
Mm,
anyone who's asking this question, for me, is I am starting to question my own body and abilities,
mm,
not in a fearful, limiting way, but in a, I'd like to be alive to do this again next week, next month,
totally.
whatever.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I'm having to, it's making me a more empathetic teacher.
Hmm. Totally.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, last one. Kate says, when someone doesn't have access to cows and year-round access to competitions, to aim for what other inspiring things can someone develop as work or and purpose to build relationships with? That's a really good question.
This is a
Um,
super question.
yeah, and I feel like a lot of people are faced with this. You want to jump on that one firstly?
I do. I think one of the things that I really, really, really encourage us all to, and I'm trying to more myself, is to broaden my horizons by looking at different disciplines.
Mm,
We are so
cool.
fortunate here in Alberta because we've got no end of really, really awesome help.
Mm-hmm.
People who can help us, but you know, whether it's somebody that's going to help me with trotting cross rails, or teaching my horse to drive, or learning to pack so I can go out to the mountains or whatnot. There is no end of what we can do
Mm,
to make new challenges, new things. And the horses themselves, when we try to just go after one thing that's not available to us, again, that's a sad way to go about our riding. But the horses themselves, if we can approach enough different things that they could try something, often a horse that shies out a lot or is really kind of goosey, they love that cowboy challenge stuff. Do you know what I mean? Where
mm,
you go,
mm,
hey, let's go do a thing where you have to be
mm,
really brave and I have to rely
mm,
on you. For me, it would be finding a group. Like, we have a
mm,
group of women across North America. It's a really small group that rides side saddle.
mm,
Um, just because we love it. We love the history. A lot of us love something different to do with that really neat horse that's super schooled, that's not competitive anymore. Like,
mm,
I just, the ski joring, where I just go out with my old horse and some old harness and I get skis on and I trot along
mm,
behind him on the hill. His job is to stop whenever I wipe out. And he goes, okay, I can do that.
mm,
I taught him to do that by every time I fell, I gave him a cookie. So he's
mm,
actually watching, waiting for me to fall, because it's just try something new.
mhm,
It's so hard. In my world, everybody wants to be a working cow horse star.
mm.
And it's so easy to, I ride with these people, you know, they're going around and they're doing their turnarounds and their lead changes and everything. And I'm just trying to trot a circle, you know. Um, it's easy to get down on ourselves
Mm-hmm.
because that's not ever going to be my reality.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some cool stuff out there. I
Mm-hmm.
got a friend who just takes a mini to the old folks' homes and that fills her horse cup.
Mm-hmm.
And she's
Cool.
probably the happiest horsewoman I know.
Right. Yeah.
That's a
You know,
challenge to me too.
yeah. I find that I find that people who desire to be in relationship with horses, they want to have a good deal, and that have seen a lot of things out there that they don't like. I
Yep.
find that what sometimes happens is we narrow our lens into, it's like, well, I've got to do it right here, and reaching out, oh, it's
Yes.
going to be, that's bad and that's not going to be good. And what I find happens is that our community gets so narrow and we stop reaching out. So
I
my
know.
encouragement, and I'm not sure, Kate, what your scenario is or how things are going, but I just really encourage that people reach out and connect with other, and you kind of said that, Lee, like connect with people in your horse community, develop your horse community, ask questions, go to different barns, start meeting people. Because I've actually been shocked by this, that you and I were sharing this earlier, Lee, like I'm in so many communities. I have so many different groups I run with that are super competitive over here, and then on this side not even caring about that at all. And the beauty is that there's so many places actually that have beautiful hearts for horses, whether it's
Yes.
competition or rodeo or trail
Yes.
riding or whatever.
Yep.
And the key is to find your hearted people in areas that you want to spend time, and they're there in every industry. Okay.
Yes.
And so the key is not to think that you can't reach out because you've had struggles and you've seen some things you don't like.
Yes.
But I don't care if it's people riding in halters or riding in spade bits. There's people on both sides that are doing a horrible job. And
Like
there's
this
people on
might
both sides doing a great job.
this might actually strike a chord with some of the people listening tonight. Um, I know women who would love to run barrels
Mm,
at or team rope at the jackpots or ride Western pleasure. And they see the very worst examples of that
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
with the horse in the gag bit and the sore back
mm-hmm,
from roping and and the forebeating and to that I say, I hear you. My challenge to you is to do that thing that always inspired you before you saw the ugly side of it.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Why could you not have a beautiful relationship with your horse where he and you are together
mm-hmm,
doing this adventure
mm-hmm,
with some pride and giving thanks to him and making your part of that sport palatable,
mm-hmm.
giving joy to other people to watch it. It is a thing, and
So
it
important.
is a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like that. I feel like there's a stage to that. Initially, people step back. And then I think this is just sage advice. Just don't let what you see in the world stop you from chasing your dreams. And whether it's that you want to leave your mark on the world, you want to see change, or you just want to go do it, and do it with a full heart of writing the story that you want, but not necessarily letting the things that you don't like in the world be your fuel. I think
Yes,
that's the biggest part.
I'm not going to compete dressage because I don't like roll cur. Well,
Right.
don't ride in roll cur then. Ride
Right.
a beautifully moving, stretching horse.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you won't win,
Mm-hmm.
but you will be doing your part to change the sport.
Right. And the other side of it is, don't necessarily believe you have to go do dressage to prove to them that it can be done another way. I think that's another negative fuel. What I feel like, it's like, just go ride dressage. Like, if that's
Yes,
what makes your heart sing, just
yes,
do what you want
yeah,
for the love of why you want to do it. And I find the purity of that then
yes.
has its impact on your soul, and it has the impact on the people around you. Because I've actually found, this is interesting, when you go somewhere and you're doing it because you're going to show somebody that it can be done different,
Mm-hmm.
the energy you come in there with is already
Yeah,
divisive.
Yeah.
It's already divisive, and then you're gonna draw out the division in other people. But when you just go in there and you're just like, you know what, I'm just happy to do my thing and try it my own way and meet people and live in an environment where we're, you know, I'm just trying to be a certain way. That becomes a powerful change, because you're just being an antidote. And I always think that, like, you want to be an antidote in the world, just be you soulfully and powerfully, you know. And I think that's just a cool thing.
Oh, what a lovely way to call an end to this day.
Exactly.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome. Awesome. Well, Lee, thank you so much for taking the time to share like this. And I know it's always a bit of a vulnerable thing to, you know, like, throw it out there and let's just chat and let's have a whole bunch of people join us, and hopefully we say
I'm
things
so
that
glad I
are not
didn't have
silly.
to tell you because you wanted me to share a vulnerable moment. And so I'm going to end up by saying I'm so glad I didn't have to tell the story where I couldn't get my horse on the trailer at the end of the day.
Or that I had to pick the big clumps out of a horse's feet and she didn't want to be caught.
Right? So,
Because
I mean,
things like that never happened to us.
if that was something else too that I would like to send everybody to bed with tonight, is I have crummy days where I disappoint myself. I respond in a less than way than I should. I know better. I don't always present my best self to my horses or to the people around me, but I keep trying. We all maybe look a little shiny in public, then because shiny sells, but we all still have our struggles. Yeah. For sure.
Isn't it true? And it's those struggles that develop the knowledge and develop the understanding, right? And it's just so normal. What do you do with it? Not do you have them? Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for staying with us. Man, we're over an hour and a half. I said to Lee, I said it'll be maybe just over an hour. It's like, oh man, we've cooked that. Thanks a lot, guys. And look forward to sharing time again with you, Lee, and with everybody else. Bye
Good
for now,
night,
guys.
everybody, and thanks for hanging in there. Thanks for having me, Josh.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, guys.